Reprezentantul Ucrainei la Organizația Națiunilor Unite a respins acuzațiile Federației Ruse în cadrul Consiliului de Securitate, calificând propaganda Moscovei drept o inversare orwelliană a realității și denunțând atacurile intense cu rachete și drone asupra civililor. Diplomatul a solicitat de urgență sprijin militar pentru apărarea antiaeriană și înăsprirea sancțiunilor economice. Vă invităm să vă abonați la canalul nostru, să apreciați acest material și să-l distribuiți pentru a susține jurnalismul independent. Rămâneți alături de echipa Jurnal Info.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the Presidency of the Democratic Republic of the Congo for convening this meeting and express my deep gratitude to the delegations of Denmark, France, Greece, Latvia, and the United Kingdom for supporting our request for this meeting. I also express my appreciation to the distinguished briefers under Secretary General Di Carlo and Acting Assistant Secretary General Ratvate for presenting evidence of new war crimes committed by the Russia against Ukrainian civilians. Mr. President, before I turn to my main remarks, I would like to refute yet another torrent of absurd claims and fabrications that we have just heard. As George Orwell famously captured in his novel 1984, three slogans for the totalitarian state that distorted the reality and allowed to control its society and justify all foreign conflicts. And I quote, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength." End of the quote. And today, the representative of Russian Federation has demonstrated to us exact Orwellian inversion of reality in action. Thus, sitting here at this chamber, Russia proposes us to believe that deliberate missile and drone strikes of residential buildings is a legitimate way of warfare. Russia wants us to believe that occupation of Ukrainian cities, totally destroyed by Russian forces, means liberation. Russia continues attempts to persuade the world that their full-scale military invasion of Ukraine is for peace and security. Nobody would ever fall for aggressor lies here. The reality is well known, and it is totally different from Russian propaganda. Russia launched this unprovoked war of aggression against peaceful nation more than 12 years ago, and now continues to abuse its seat in this council. And we don't have to forget that this presence here is illegal, and it should be removed from this council entirely. Mr. President, we requested this emergency meeting because we are witnessing yet another intensification of Russian terror against Ukrainian civilians, and as it was also mentioned by other Security Council members here. Russia has increased its missile and drone strikes against our cities. This leads not to peace, but to more destruction and deaths. May and June were among the deadliest months for Ukrainians for the last 4 years. This is the fact supported by the UN reports. Unfortunately, July is continuing this tragic and barbaric trend. Every day, Russian missiles, bombs, drones target residential buildings and civilian infrastructure across Ukraine. Kyiv remains the primary target of all these attacks and suffers from devastating consequences. On the night of 2nd July, Russia launched 74 missiles, 496 drones against Ukraine, killing 31 people and injuring more than 100 others, including 4 children. Following the same strategy, on the night of 6 July, another Russian massive attack of 68 missiles and 351 attack drones against Kyiv and Kyiv region was carried out. That night, Russia killed 28 people. Among the victims, as mentioned by the USG Di Carlo, was a 12-year-old boy, whose body, along with that of his mother, was recovered from the rubble of a residential apartment building in Kyiv. More than 130 people were injured, including 9 children. These are the casualties in Kyiv and its neighborhood. But Russian attacks target other Ukrainian cities as well: Kharkiv, Odessa, Zaporizhia, Dnipro, Sumy, Kramatorsk remain under consistent threat of missiles, drones, and bombs. The death toll of Ukrainian civilians since beginning of July continued to rise. On 1st July, at least 6 people were killed, 72 injured. 3rd July, 16 people killed, 62 injured. 4th July, at least 4 were killed, and 56 were injured. This is not just a mere statistics, but a tragedy for all my compatriots. Mr. President, the Kremlin resorts to the strategy of massive terror to intimidate and force Ukrainians to surrender. Russia deliberately targets residential buildings and civilian infrastructure. They Russia is also deliberately creating unbearable living conditions in temporarily occupied territories. Despite repeated calls by OCHA and Red Cross, Russia continues to push thousands of innocent Ukrainians whose homes remain under the temporary occupation in Ukraine's Kherson region to the brink of survival, severely restricting their access to food, water, and other basic necessities. Today, the name of Russian-occupied town of Eşecul has become one of the symbols of the humanitarian crisis caused by the Russian occupation throughout this war. Russia is unable to ensure even the most basic standards of safety, well-being of Ukrainians living under its occupation, nor is it willing to allow civilians to leave the temporarily occupied territories. Instead, Russia once again resorts to its usual tactic of shifting responsibility, blaming the victim, while falsifying the facts, spreading propaganda. All these actions amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. But let us be clear here. This strategy of terror is complete failure, as was the plan to invade Kyiv in 3 days. Ukraine won't be coerced into accepting a sham peace. Since the start of this full-scale military invasion, Russian military has given no fewer than 15 deadlines to occupy the entirety of Ukraine's Donetsk region. Every single one of those deadlines passed without success. Nor will these objectives be achieved this year or next year. Russia's false claims regarding the capture of Konstantinivka are yet another example of systematic disinformation campaign. But the reality on the ground tells a very different story. Russia is not winning, and its monthly battlefield losses have reached levels that are increasingly difficult to sustain. Their losses are rising every day. Once a soldier is signed up to fight, he can expect to live for just 10 days to 3 weeks, from the arrival at the training center to death at the battlefield. In May alone, Russia lost more than 30,000 soldiers. In June, approximately 28,000 soldiers. Despite suffering these losses, Russia has achieved only limited and incremental advances along the front line. Also, our strike capabilities have evolved. We effectively implemented our middle and deep strike sanctions against Russian war machine and continue to significantly constrain Russia's ability to sustain and expand its aggression. We are targeting Russian military bases and war-supporting industry, oil refinery plants, its logistic hubs, and other military targets. We are implementing our inherent right to self-defense and attack military potential of the aggressor in full compliance with the norms of international law. Our aim is to deprive Russia of the weapon and resources which fuel its war of aggression against Ukraine. Mr. President, Russia started this war in 2014. So the Kremlin bears full responsibility for all consequences of such decision. Unlike Putin, we are not fighting this war because of unrealized imperial ambitions of geopolitical fantasies. Together with our allies and partners, we are defending our land, people, and future. And we are very grateful for the partners' support in line with Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. And we are also grateful to NATO members for their support and assistance announced in Ankara. For the numerous times, Ukraine confirmed its readiness to immediate ceasefire and peace talks. On June 4th, President of Ukraine sent an open letter to Putin, once again offering to end the war. And we continue our talks with the United States and other allies on finding the most effective way to stop it. But Russia has no desire to do it. Moscow continues to reject every genuine peace initiative. Even today, in this chamber, instead of finding a way how to stop it, Moscow justified the killings and spreads propaganda. But you can't escape from the responsibility for your crimes. Russia's aggression can only be stopped through the strength and through practical actions. So first, support Ukraine's defense capability against the aggressor. It's not the escalation, but the only strategy to restore peace and to save lives. Today, Ukraine is the only country in the world that faces massive ballistic attacks almost every day, and we need support to resist this threat. Every day, in delivering interceptors like PAC-3, PAC-2 will cause more casualties among Ukrainian civilians. Pressure against Russia's military potential is the second point. We need to choke the sources of Russian military capabilities and increase sanctions. We must stop the Russian military-industrial complex. Russia's access to critical technologies and components used in its weapons and equipment must be blocked. And the Russian economy is showing clear signs of structural exhaustion. And this is the right moment for us to tighten all constraints against Moscow in financial, banking, trade, energy spheres, and in particular against the shadow fleet. Third, accountability as a moral obligation and deterrent against the future aggression. We call for the continuation of work aimed to restore justice for the victims of Russia, and we welcome the recent decision of the government of Netherlands to host the special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine in The Hague. We also demand the immediate return of unlawfully deported Ukrainian children, illegally detained civilians, and prisoners of war without any delay back to their homes. We need to bring all those responsible for the war crimes to justice. Strengthening of the UN effectiveness in implementing its functions is the fourth point. The paralysis of the UN Security Council regarding Russia's crimes must be stopped by the international community, who still respect rules-based international order. Thus, we once again here appeal to the members of Security Council to place on the table, without further delay, a draft resolution calling for immediate and unconditional ceasefire. Such a step would be a clear signal of support and restoration of comprehensive, just, and lasting peace for Ukraine. Mr. President, there is the only one path forward for Russia to end this war of aggression against Ukraine, now. It requires Moscow to recognize that its war is a historic catastrophe. If they refuse to stop it, the costs and consequences for Russia will continue to rise. The choice is Moscow's, but the responsibility for stopping them is ours. Thank you, Mr. President.